In this episode, we talked to Alex Wilson about how to accept stock and crypto to empower generosity. Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Church Leadership Lab, the podcast that is all about empowering healthy churches. We love having conversations that hopefully help you as church leaders and hopefully ultimately help your church to grow, to thrive, and to be a healthy church in your community. Today, we're going to have a conversation with Alex Wilson, who's the co-founder of The Giving Block, and we're going to talk about all things stock and crypto. Now, that's a world that for a lot of church leaders, you may or may not be familiar with, you may have heard about, but maybe you haven't really dove into what does this mean for us as a church? Is this something that we should be participating in? Is this a way maybe to cultivate more generosity and ultimately to be able to steward resources well for the kingdom? And so we're going to have a conversation and dig into that, and we are excited for it. Now, before we do, I would love to invite you to subscribe, to leave a review if you haven't already of the podcast. That helps this podcast get into more church leaders' ears and hopefully help empower more healthy churches. So we would invite you to do that, share this with somebody. Again, if it's helpful, we want to help more church leaders. All right, we're going to jump into our conversation here with Alex Wilson. Alex is the co-founder of The Giving Block, which was acquired by Shift4. And now Alex and his co-founder, Pat, lead the crypto and nonprofit verticals for all of Shift4, a large publicly traded payments company. Due to Alex's unique experience in non-cash giving, particularly in crypto philanthropy, Alex has been featured in numerous publications such as Forbes, USA Today, and Bloomberg. He also was recognized as Forbes 30 Under 30 for social impact. This conversation is full of wisdom, full of ideas, full of information around ways to empower more generosity. And so we're excited for this conversation with Alex Wilson. Well, Alex, thanks for taking time to come on the podcast. We are looking forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Scott.
Now, we ask everybody this question, and so we're going to ask you. We just shared kind of your public bio, but there's always something that doesn't make that, but all your friends and family know about you, this thing. So let us in. Tell us what that thing is for you.
Yeah. For me, it's I've always been really entrepreneurial, even from a young age, even in high school, college, always looking for side hustles, little side businesses, whether it was, starting a landscaping business in high school with a couple of friends, shoveling driveways, mowing lawns, even had a small little domain name business, buying and selling domain names, or even a little side business I had, like helping older people basically list things on eBay and helping them sell things around their house for a commission.
That's awesome.
So always trying to do little side hustles, and then, eventually got to the point of starting something much bigger, like The Giving Block.
Yeah.
What is
That's
the
awesome.
weirdest thing you ever sold on eBay? Weirdest thing.
It's not so much weird. It's just like maybe unexpected. I've sold even cars and boats on eBay.
Okay.
Which I don't think many people go to eBay looking for that necessarily. It's not top of mind.
No, eBay's still, there's still such an eBay subculture. I have a good friend of mine who he has a certain t-shirt that he's just decided that's his. Like, he loves that t-shirt. And so he needed more, but it's like I forget the brand. I think it might be like Banana Republic from like whatever, like a few years ago. But he found like 5 or 6 of them on eBay. Somebody was just selling. He's like, yeah. I bought my favorite t-shirt on eBay.
It's pretty amazing.
I know. I love it. Well, as much as it would be fun to dig into all the strange world of eBay and also effective world of eBay, we're going to talk about some other things in regard to donating stock crypto, how that affects the church, what that looks like, navigating that. For some, that's like brand new territory. For others, they're in it. For others, they're like, this is kind of clunky. How can I do this better? So let's just kind of jump in. And the first thing I want to start with is knowing that the world of donating stock, even more so donating crypto, can be a bit confusing for those who aren't in it. And so there's a lot of misinformation out there. There's some common myths, things that get wrong. So what are some things that you've heard as common myths that church leaders often believe when it comes to stock and crypto?
Yeah, I'd say one really big one that applies to both stock and crypto is we often talk to a church and they'll say, well, we've never actually had a donor reach out and say, I want to give crypto or I want to give stock. And that's probably because they didn't see the option on your website, right? Or at the church itself. And it's this kind of catch-22, right? Where it's like, well, if you're not asking for it and if you're not making it easy for them, they're probably not going to try to give it to you. And then once they start taking, these non-cash assets like crypto and stock, they're pleasantly surprised by how many of their donors start giving it. It's just one of those things where if you don't talk about it and you don't try, you really don't know.
Yeah. And that makes sense, right? Because you can, not many people are going to be so proactive to say, no, I want to give this way. I want you, church, to figure it out. And so if you don't see that option, they're not going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And then I would say a different piece of that too is I think churches underestimate how many people own those assets, right? Whether it's stock or crypto. And even if you look at the broader picture of how wealth is stored in America and really around the world, the majority of wealth, 80, 90% is actually stored in assets. Yeah. People aren't hoarding cash in bank accounts necessarily, right? The ultra wealthy have real estate, they have businesses, they have investments. It's not all just sitting in cash in a bank account. So typically most of their wealth is stored in an asset like stocks or crypto. And it's actually much more tax efficient for them to give that asset directly rather than, sell the asset, pay taxes on it, and then donate, really 20, 30% less after they've paid tax on it.
Well, Alex, you may have just answered this next question, or maybe you can kind of walk through that and maybe help us understand that a little bit more, but it's definitely not as common to give, at least to my church, in stock or crypto. I used to run a children's hospital foundation. It was very common for people to give via very different forms of donations. But I mean, that was to a charitable organization. But maybe our churches, we don't think that those are available, maybe because it's not on our website. But why should a church, I think you just kind of explained why a giver might want to use those, but why should a church accept those forms? Is there benefit on both sides?
Yeah, I mean, it's really a win-win for both sides. So one is, right, it's always good to give your donors more flexibility in terms of how they give and what they give.
Sure.
But the financial benefit is really for both sides because the donor, because the tax benefit is getting the fair market value deduction of that asset they're giving. They're basically giving pre-tax donations, and the charity or the church is also tax exempt. So they're getting the full value as well. So the recipient, the church or the charity, is also getting more value and they're getting more money in the end of the day. And in a lot of cases, they're getting donations they wouldn't have gotten otherwise. That's a huge thing we find. Either it's a new donor, and if it's not a new donor and it's an existing donor, they're typically giving much, much more when they're giving stock or crypto than when they're making a credit card or ACH donation.
Yeah.
So it's really a win all around.
Well, if you're in ministry, then you know church operations can be a huge challenge. There's a lot to do, little time to do it. And whether it's just you or you have a team, my guess is you have a full plate. So how do you do things like communication and engagement, stewarding your finances, managing your digital presence, fostering community, and so much more in a way that builds a healthy church? Well, answering that question was the goal of creating the Guide to Healthy Church Operations. We wanted to take our 40 plus years of experience serving the church, combined with wisdom from various experts to provide a blueprint for how you can navigate the ever-changing world of church operations. In this guide, you'll find things like how to improve member engagement and participation, building into staff and volunteers, making better decisions with clear metrics, the essentials of financial stewardship for churches, and so much more. And of course, we wanted to give this to you for free. So there's a link in the show notes to download the Guide to Healthy Church Operations. And we would love for you to grab a copy and use it to help grow a healthy church.
We made it sound really, really easy. So if I'm listening, I'm like, yeah, cool, Alex, but how does this actually work? So can you maybe kind of get into a little bit of the nuts and bolts, maybe walk us through, because I think I know, but I probably don't. Walk us through kind of the process of actually donating stock or crypto, and maybe two different paths. We may need to do two answers here, one stock, one crypto, specifically through the giving block. How does that actually work? And then I really want to know what the lift is. Like, what is the actual workload for a church to do that? Can you kind of walk us through it?
Yeah, definitely. And this really goes back to some of the misconceptions. I think people hear crypto, especially stock to a degree, and they think, oh, wow, this is going to be complicated, right?
Yeah.
This is going to be a lot of work. Our goal was really to make either stock or crypto giving just as easy as any online gift. So, for the nonprofit or the church, it's really just coming in as cash for them. So if a donor is giving Bitcoin in this scenario, they're going to send Bitcoin to a wallet, and we're actually going to automatically convert that to US dollars for the church. So they don't have to do anything manually. They're actually just getting US dollars sent to their bank account, and they're getting all the reporting they would normally get, right, on the donor, their name, their email, their address. The donor is even automatically getting the tax receipt they need, all the tax reporting, all the compliance that needs to happen for every gift. All that's getting captured in our system. So for the church, it's really no different than getting other gifts. It's just what the donor is sending in on the front end. And really the same process works for stocks. In both cases, it's being sold for US dollars immediately. Church doesn't have to matter if the price goes up or down. It's just, it is what it is when it comes in at the current market price. And they've got the cash to put towards their mission the next day.
So you're selling those digital assets just like selling a boat on eBay is what I just heard. It's that easy.
This is actually easier, I would say. It's selling something on eBay.
Would you, Alex, would you help us understand, because there's some who may want to jump into this world listening to this who haven't been in it at all.
Yeah.
And so they might not know, apart from, someone like the Giving Block, apart from that, can you kind of walk through, if you don't have that, let's just say stock, for instance, what does that process look like? Because I'm not an expert, but I do know you're biting off a lot that you got to chew on when it's like, I'll just kind of handle it myself.
Yeah. And we see that a lot with both stock and crypto. I'd say stock more so than crypto, because when we started the Giving Block, actually, we were focused just on crypto. That went so well that nonprofits started asking, hey, can you help us with the stock component too? Because it's quite manual. And if you go to most nonprofit or church websites that do accept stock, you might see like, hey, if you want to donate stock, either reach out to this email address, or here's a snippet of like our brokerage instructions, call our broker, something like that. And usually it requires like filling out a PDF, maybe mailing it, faxing it, something very, very old school and manual. And as you can imagine, sort of the modern donor doesn't love that process. And there's a pretty high chance they're going to say, I'll get to it later, or I'm just not going to do it. Right. So we really want this to be something you can just click through right on the website and make the gift then and there without having to mail something or fax something. But you'd be amazed. That's really the most common way of accepting stock is, hey, contact our broker, fill out this PDF, send it to us, and we'll get back to you in a week and let you know what's next.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that people don't realize that, like, so even on the church's end, that's a lot of work for them, right? Hey, I got to remember to do this, to that. I got to call this person. I got to put this in my calendar for, a week after, whatever. But I think the other piece, like, I'd love to hear you speak into this. Like, typically if somebody is donating through these means, they're not setting up a kind of recurring $25 a month donation, right? Like usually if I'm going to donate a percentage of stock or crypto, typically, in your opinion, are those larger donations? And if so, I think it's wise to understand, hey, I want this process to go smooth and to be so efficient, because that communicates a level of care and stewardship to the donor. So I guess the question is that kind of the case in historically what you've seen people looking to give through these methods?
Yeah, no, you're spot on with that this tends to be a larger and more strategic gift. I mean, I'd say roughly $10,000 is a good average that we see across the non-cash assets, because this isn't, like you said, right, a monthly $25 gift. This is, hey, I'm actually doing a bit of tax planning, thinking ahead, working with my accountant, my financial advisor, maybe a tax attorney, and saying, I want to strategically donate, $50,000 at the end of this year. Maybe the next year it's actually $100,000 because they made more money that year and there's more to offset. They're not usually just giving $100 here and there. It's very strategic and really large gift size. So it really doesn't take many donors to really have a huge impact. And we've seen, multi-million-dollar gifts. Those aren't happening every day, but I bet you they're happening much more often than most church leaders realize.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really powerful form of generosity. And honestly, I'd love to kind of hear that, because you've been in this for a long time, serving a lot of churches, serving nonprofits. Do you have kind of any stories of generosity like that, to where you've seen the impact actually then make it to the church and see ministry happen because they've started to accept stock and crypto?
Yeah, we've got quite a few, case studies, and I'll be sure to share a link afterwards so you can send some of them out. Yeah. But one that's top of mind is Vive Church. It's a church out in San Francisco. A couple of years ago, they started taking both stock and crypto for the very first time. And in the first year, raised hundreds of thousands of dollars, much more than they were expecting. They set a goal to raise $10,000 and raised hundreds of thousands of dollars. Wow. And they were totally blown away and surprised by how many of their supporters actually own stock in crypto. Mm-hmm. And we hear this story over and over again. They're always pleasantly surprised. And I will say the churches and nonprofits that we work with that see the greatest impact are the ones that are proactive. Mm-hmm. Right? It's one thing to actually say, okay, I have a way to accept crypto and stock, but you also have to tell your community that you accept it.
Right.
We often see the first part done and they forget to do the second part. And it's not that you've got to totally change the way you fundraise and talk to your community, but just weave it into your existing fundraising plans. Mm-hmm. If you're sending out an email, say, hey, by the way, now we take stock in crypto. And for most of these organizations, getting even a couple gifts, $10,000, $20,000, that can be a game changer for their annual budget. And it's been really amazing to see that help churches grow and expand, in some cases even open new locations. So it's been really impactful.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious as well, like when you think of just then stepping back, because you're in the world of technology and generosity, but when you step back maybe from stock and crypto, what are some things that you see about kind of the future of generosity, giving with technology? Like where is that kind of going? And what are some things that might be cool innovations or different things like that that are kind of on your radar that church leaders might want to kind of put on their radars too?
Yeah, I would say more than anything, it's like an openness and a mindset that what's important in the church and nonprofit space is going to continue to always change. Mm-hmm. If you think back 10, 15 years, not everyone was taking credit cards yet, right?
Yeah.
Now it seems crazy to think that, right? And I think we'll say the same thing in 5 or 10 years about crypto and stock gifts. And I'm sure in 5 or 10 years, there's going to be something totally new that I haven't even thought about yet. Right. Yeah. So I would say, like, when it comes to technology, there's no permanent solution. It's always evolving. It's always improving. And how your community and your donors want to give is going to continue to change. So it's just so important that you continue to adopt modern technologies, modern donation methods. And that's everything, right? Not just how the donors are giving, but like making your website just easy to use, having a good CRM that's organized. All these pieces really matter. And it's so important to stay on top of it, because once you fall behind, it's really hard to get caught back up. Yeah. And there really is sort of an early mover advantage for a lot of these things, because if you start building these relationships with these modern donors that are giving crypto, stock, things like that, you've got a lifetime ahead of them, especially because they tend to be a little younger. So it's really important that churches stay on top of new technologies.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we love on this podcast is conversations that empower healthy churches. Certainly a conversation about generosity. How do you steward resources? How do you take resources and put them into kingdom work as a part of that? But I would love to hear just your thoughts, having worked with a lot of churches. In your opinion, what's one essential component of a healthy church?
I think it really relates to the last question of technology. Like, I think it's this idea of adaptability to the modern times. Yeah. I think a lot of churches and nonprofits more broadly tend to continue to do things the way they've always been done, right? And it's very easy to get stuck in your day-to-day and not step back and think about the big picture. I think it's so important to think ahead. What do we need to do in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years to remain successful and continue to grow and serve our community? And it doesn't necessarily even need to be right when you look back 10 years. but you need to be at least thinking about it, right? And continuing to adjust your view and what needs to be done. Because I think too often when you see a church or a nonprofit that is maybe shrinking or just not as popular as it used to be, it's usually because they aren't adapting.
Yeah.
Right. So I just think this a mindset of adaptability is just so important for a healthy church.
Yeah. Love that. Well, we're going to keep going our conversation. I want to make sure as we kind of wrap up for you to give people places to go to check out the Giving Block, but we're not quite done yet. So we're going to get there. But first, we have what we call our final five. So these are rapid fire coming at you. A lot of pressure with these questions. So most guests fold and they just leave the podcast, but I think we're going to make it.
Give up.
Yeah. Just kidding. It hasn't happened yet.
If somebody did that, I'd be like, okay, like take a breath. Not life and death.
We went too far. All right. First one is this. What's one book that you'd recommend to church leaders?
So I'm a little biased and it's going to be Bitcoin related, but I love the book Bitcoin Billionaires.
Nice.
This is the book I tell, friends and family to read when they're first trying to get into crypto, because it's a really fun story that also explains why people care about Bitcoin, why it's valuable. It actually follows the story of the Winklevoss twins. If you're familiar with them, they were the ones who had a falling out with Mark Zuckerberg in the early days of Facebook. They got really into Bitcoin after that, actually. And there's a crazy story behind it that's really entertaining. They ended up starting a bunch of different crypto companies and making a lot of money. So I highly recommend that. It's a great primer getting into the world of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency.
Nice.
For anybody that's seen the Social Network movie, I think what you just said, they had a falling out, was like the nicest way of saying what happened. Like, that was very kind of you.
Yeah, they are not friends, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think that's how they would phrase it, but that was very kind. So,
yeah.
All right, Alex, what is the last thing that you listened to, like on Spotify?
On Spotify, I'm a listener of Huberman Lab, that podcast, if you're familiar. Really into the healthy living, things I can do to hopefully live longer and just live a healthier life, whether it's new diets or exercise routines, supplements. I'm a big fan of Andrew Huberman.
Love it.
What is your favorite piece of technology or software? And the only thing you can't say is your phone. We make that rule.
I am a power user of Monday.com. So project management, task management, even making notes, really versatile, just helps keep me organized.
Are you a color coder?
I don't do too much with colors, actually. It's more of just like an easy place to store all of my info and keep it organized.
Yeah, giant to-do list. I love it.
Exactly.
I love Monday.com.
Endless to-do list. It just gets longer, right?
Right. Yeah. Do you put things on your list just to cross them off even if you've already done them?
Sometimes. If I'm starting my day getting organized, it's like, all right, actually I already did that, but I'm going to put it on here.
It's have a sense one thing of accomplishment. Done. Yeah, it
feels good.
Gratification. I support it.
Love it.
All right.
Exactly.
All right, moving on. What is a quote, piece of wisdom, something that has really stuck with you over the years?
I think it comes from starting the Giving Block, but something I don't know where it originally came from, but it's, as an entrepreneur and as a leader, I think most things that really are important and matter to you take much longer than you want them to. Right? It always ends up being much harder than you imagine it when you first think of it. And that's not necessarily like maybe so surprising, but it's just something that always sticks with me. It's like, don't get too disappointed or too upset when something does take a bit longer, as long as you're still working towards that end goal. I think it's so easy to get frustrated. Like, I thought that was going to be done this week and now it's going to take another week. Yes, you always want things to be done on time, but like it's okay. And a lot of these important things just take a long time.
So just go back to your Monday.com board, change the deadline to next week, and just keep swimming is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, especially if it's out of your control, really.
Yeah.
Right? If it's on you, that's different. But if it's external and totally out of your control, like you can't get too worked up about it.
It's good.
Yeah. All right, last one. What's one thing you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders?
I'd say really embrace and value younger donors and younger community members. I know it's something that's always a challenge, I think, for churches and nonprofits more broadly. But I think you'd be surprised by the return on your investment of spending time with them and connecting with them and thinking about things from their perspective too. We often hear from nonprofits and churches saying like, well, it's great that all these young people have crypto, but, they don't donate, they don't get involved, they don't volunteer. But you'd be surprised. It's often sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy of leaders when they say those things and they don't engage the young people, and then those things don't happen, right?
Shocking.
Yeah.
So weird how that didn't work out.
Yeah, exactly. So I'd say maybe it's in a short way, give young people a chance and connect with them.
Yeah. No, that's great. Hey, as we wrap up here, can you just share with everyone where they can learn more about the Giving Block?
Yeah. Best place to go is thegivingblock.com. We've got a newsletter you can subscribe to at the bottom of the page, social media channels across all the major platforms that you can follow us on. And we'll be sure to include some links in this as well.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, well, we'll link to that and the other resources so people can get to that easily. Alex, we so appreciate your time today, sharing your wisdom, and hopefully helping people empower more generosity and stewarding resources for the kingdom better. We're grateful for your time, and we're grateful for those of you listening and watching this. We hope it's been helpful. If it has, we'd love for you to share it, whether you send a link, subscribe, leave a comment, a review, all that stuff helps. So we would invite you to do that. And hopefully we can get these conversations into more church leaders' ears to help empower more healthy churches. So thanks so much for being with us today, and we'll see you next time.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.